keep one thing in mind, that is that the summary that we're presenting highlight the main points that you should pay attention to when you're doing the detailed reading of the slides that are presented earlier in detail. So the summaries are meant to draw your attention to the critical points that you should keep in mind as you revise maybe for your exams. Demographic theory basically focuses on explaining why there is an agglomeration of populations in the specifically defined limits of the urban area. Remember, we tried to explain the specifically limits of the urban area in our earlier sessions, but I can go over that again. If you take Accra as an illustration, Accra occupies a space. In other words, if you, for example, you're traveling to the eastern region and you leave Dodowa, you've left Accra. You're traveling up north through Nsawam, if you leave Amasaman, you've left Accra. If you're going westwards towards Takoradi and you leave Weja, you've left Accra. So basically, Weja, Amasaman, and Dodowa, plus the Atlantic Ocean, they constitute the specifically defined limits of Accra. That is the space that Accra occupies. And the concentration of people in that space is what basically refers to demographic populations or demographic urbanization. Now, the key point that this theory deals with is to explain why people concentrate in the urban communities. You may be living in an urban community and you want to ask yourself, why exactly am I here? According to the theory suggested by, and this is a classical theory by Lee and Lewis in 1966, they suggested there are two main factors. These are the centrifugal factors or the push factors of urbanization, and the centripetal factors or the pull factors or the factors which attract people to the urban areas. The centrifugal factors are factors or conditions in the urban situation or in the rural situation which are so frustrating that people had to leave in order to search for greener pastures wherever they find themselves in an urban area. Now, these pull and push factors are either economic or social or cultural. We're going to be focusing primarily on the push factors. The economic push factors, basically compulsory marketing schemes, the feudal land tenure system, the medical factor of technification or the mechanization of agriculture, and the industrial gap, which explains the absence of jobs in the rural communities. Now let's look at the compulsory marketing schemes. These are economic policies or measures adopted by government predominantly in the third world countries, including Africa, Latin America, and Asia, under which the governments decide to pay fixed prices for the primary products of farmers. For example, if you produce cocoa, you're obligated under the compulsory marketing scheme to have to sell to the government at a fixed price, instead of probably selling those commodities, your commodities, whether it's cocoa, coffee, or copra, on the free market where you determine the prices yourself. In this case, under the compulsory marketing scheme, the government determines the price for you. The problem here is that you're getting a price paid for your commodity, which may not be quite satisfactory in terms of your own perception of the hard work that you put into the production process. So you feel a little bit, maybe you're a little bit cheated. Imagine that you harvest a basket full of tomatoes or a basket full of yams, and you send this to the market to sell. And then a customer comes to you and tells you that, listen, I want to buy your tomatoes for 10 cedis, or a basket full of yams for 10 cedis. You tell him, listen, that is not the price at which I want to sell the tomatoes or the yam. And you have to indicate to the customer that this is how much I'm asking for. If you can pay me 50 Ghana cedis, okay, you can take the basket full of yams. Otherwise, she want to leave. And then the customer, if he looks at the products and they are of good quality and he wants to buy them, he has to haggle with you and ask for reductions. And ultimately, you may sell that basket full of yams for 45 or 40 Ghana cedis. And that is the price that makes you happy. In the case of the compulsory marketing schemes, the government pays you a price that the government determines. And the frustrations with this system is that people feel, farmers feel cheated. And sometimes, in order to make up for the loss in income that they feel they are enduring, they may have to smuggle the cocoa outside of the country to sell on freer markets where they can determine the prices for their own. So this is a frustration that can make some farmers decide to leave the rural areas or the farming economy, the agricultural economy. They want to leave to come to the urban areas where they perceive that the income that they can get for whatever work they get there will be much higher and also protected and predictable. Now, the feudal land tenure system. A lot of the times, in most third world countries, there are land tenure systems. And let me move straight to what happens in Ghana. We have in Ghana the Bunu and the Abusa systems. And at the Bunu system, the farmer takes half of the proceeds from the farm. In other words, the proceeds from the farm at the end of the harvesting season is shared between the farmer and the tenant 50-50. The problem with this is that the farmer or the tenant is not very pleased with taking just about half of the proceeds from the farm, because he's the one who invests a lot of energy, a lot of risks in going to the farm every day. And when the harvest season is over, then the landlord, who basically just sits at home and takes 50% from plot number 1, 50% from plot number 2, 50% from plot number 3, is doing no work and is getting a lot of money, much more than the tenant or the farmer himself. So the land tenure system, if you look at the bonus system, is not very motivational for farmers. And if they endure this kind of frustration for a long time, they want to leave the rural areas and look for greener pastures in the urban area. Under the Abusa system, the situation is even worse. In this system, the farmer takes just 1/3. The proceeds from the farm are shared into 3 parts. And the tenant takes only 1/3, and the landlord, that is the owner of the plot of land on which the farmer is cultivating his crops, it takes 2/3. And that is even worse in comparison to even the bonus system. So frustration from the land tenure system is enough to make people leave the village. That is a push factor. Now, the medical factor is explained by the fact that in the pre-colonial times, that is before the British came, parents or couples, let's put it that way, will have to have so many babies. Maybe they have to have about 10 babies, because they anticipate that if they have 10, about 6 of them will be killed or would die because of the 6 killer diseases, or not 6 killer diseases, or the killer diseases which normally kill children, including diseases like tetanus or diphtheria or whooping cough or measles. You should check on the details of these diseases, which normally kill the children when they are born. So if you have 10 children at birth, you may end up having just about 3 or 4 surviving. Fortunately, as a result of improvement in the medical science, we now have immunization, which means that if you have 10 children and they're all immunized, all of the 10 will survive. But traditional societies continue to have 10 children in spite of the existence of the immunization system, which will make all those babies survive. The expectation is that because we now have immunization, they should cut down on the size of the families, but they still continue to have large families. Maybe for a number of reasons. Number one, maybe for the prestige of having so many children. Some men are known to boast that, listen, I have 40 children. How many do you have? And that's a source of prestige for the man. And for economic reasons, they may want to have so many children who are going to be able to help them on the farm. All of these are understandable. And according to Nukunya, if you want to qualify as an ancestor after you've passed on, then they need to have a lot of children. So all of these beliefs play on the minds of the traditional people, which is the reason why they have so many children, in spite of the fact that all the children will survive after they've been immunized. So what happens? Basically, the rural areas do not have a lot of jobs, and we are creating so many children who are surviving. This means that there is a creation of a surplus of labor, a lot of whom are made redundant because they don't have jobs, as a result of which they will have to leave the rural areas to come to the urban area looking for greener pastures. This is how the medical factor explains the rural to urban migration. Now, technification of agriculture simply means that the mechanization of agriculture, a situation in which a farmer has machines which he uses in place of manpower. Now, let's take a typical situation. Assuming you have an acre of land which, prior to your access to a machine, was cultivated by 10 people. Now that you have a machine, it takes only you, one person, to till the crop to harvest that acre of land. The meaning is that 9 other people have been forced off the land by reason of the mechanization of agriculture. And those 9 people, they're probably from my farm because I have a machine, from your farm and from the other person's farm. So 999 people from people who have owned or have access to mechanization are being made redundant. How do they survive? They too will have to leave the rural areas to come to the urban areas looking for jobs. So these are the main economic push factors which explain the agglomeration or concentration of people in the rural areas. Remember, the people who leave by reason of the compulsory market schemes, those who leave by reason of the land tenure system, those who leave by reason of the medical factor, those who leave by reason of the mechanization. All of them are coming to the urban area, and they're leaving here, they settle here. That is how the urban population increases by reason of these demographic factors. The social factor simply has to do with mobility, social mobility, that is your ability to move from a lower status in society to a higher status. Now, in the rural areas, the situation is based on ascription, which means that you have to wait. You have to wait until you become the Abusia opinion. How long is it going to take you to become an Abusia opinion? Because you have to wait until the current Abusia opinion is probably passed on before you could become the Abusia opinion. So that takes a lot of time. You have to wait to probably get married. So it takes a lot of time, and the waiting period is what becomes quite frustrating for the dwellers in the villages. And when they see what's going on in the urban communities, they simply want to leave and come to the urban areas where the possibility of not waiting but achieving your own mobility is predictable. Now we have the cultural factors. We simply explain the boredom in the rural areas. according to assuming, the rural areas have been made to look as though they have been deliberately ignored in the provision of good social facilities. We're talking about good schools, good hospitals, good places of cultural retreat, good roads, and also good entertainment. Now, when you go to the rural areas, a lot of you probably live in there or have come out from the rural areas. Life is absolutely boring. It is dull, it is dark and drab, and therefore frustrating. Some of the rural areas, they have electricity connected to their places, but they can't afford to pay the bills, so the light may be on the road, but it is not connected to their home. So the darkness is still there. They have to rely on kerosene lamps to be able to make their way in the darkness. That also means that because they don't have electric power, they don't have access to probably radios or television to find some joy and relaxation in entertainment. And the meaning is that if you are kind of completely bored, one of the ways of entertaining yourself is to rely on sex. And relying on sex means that we are giving birth to a lot more of children who will survive because of the availability of immunization, and they lead to the creation of the excess of labor. Now, you look at the centripetal factors. The factors that I've just explained are the factors which compel people in the rural areas to have to move out, because the situation, the conditions of life in the rural areas are so frustrating, and they just have to leave if they want to make livelihoods much more meaningful. The centripetal factors are probably much more important in the attraction of people to the urban areas. According to Kenneth Little, they are much more significant, and they act as a lure or a magnet attracting people to the rural areas. We have the economic factors. Economically, rural incomes are lesser than urban incomes. The incomes in the urban areas are higher, and they are protected. What do we mean by protection? The meaning is that the government has minimum wage laws, which means that any worker cannot be paid a certain level of income lower than what the government has decided as the minimum wage. So the income available to the migrant is predictable, is guaranteed, is protected. You cannot be cheated. Further on, if you are fired unjustifiably, the trade unions are there to protect you. If they discover that the firing is unjustifiable, they can fight on your behalf and get you reinstated, so that there's a job security in the urban areas. And this is an attraction. Now, social mobility is based on ascription and is very slow in the rural areas, but in the urban areas, they are achievable and they can be quite fast. For example, you can come to the urban areas as someone who is unemployed and has no income, and you can set up your own job as, let's say, a Nyami Bachelor shoe shine business. And you can print a business card that you are the CEO of this Nyami Bachelor shoe shine business. You have raised yourself from being a nobody to being instantly a CEO, and that constitutes social mobility. And when you start working and you're getting some income on a daily basis or on a monthly basis, your style of life would equally improve, because you probably start eating fried rice and chicken instead of eating keke and fish all the time, or kokonte and okra soup all the time. You change your lifestyle from eating those diets to a much more exciting diet. You have become socially mobile. And that also is an attraction. And the cultural factors, basically the urban areas are regarded as a crucible of civilization, a place of intense and refined cultural activities where the cultural goals are actively pursued. It means that in the urban areas we have good schools, good hospitals, good sources of drinking water, good roads, and good places of cultural retreat, in other words, entertainment facilities, are to be found in the urban areas and act as a lure attracting migrants. Who does not want to live in a very exciting environment? In fact, if you're traveling from the rural areas into the urban areas and you come on the fringes of Accra, you see the difference. You see the lights that the urban area is much more exciting compared to the darkness and the dullness in the rural areas. So all of these attractions explain why a lot of people want to come to the urban areas to make their life a little bit more meaningful.